Recently, the Honest Wargamer put out a video explaining that he believes that Games Workshop studios and departments are in a civil war with each other over who gets to sell what models and for what game, and that the company have a capitalist mindset that's causing friction on top of this. Well, in this video, I will be explaining why I don't believe those things are accurate. I would like to state I'm a big fan of his channels along with Val, and I plugged them as a great channel in a previous video and will continue to look forward to their great content despite my specific disagreement with that recent video. And another final note to say that I don't agree with any of the changes that Games Workshop have announced on this topic. I just don't believe in the reasons given in that video, so let's get into why. It's been a fairly long-running theme and story by Rob on his channels about this topic, and that recent video focused potential insights that the business model for Games Workshop consists of these silo departments like specialist game studios, which was previously known as Forge World, and that they have a financial separate sales split, a separate cost center whereby the sales of specific models only get attributed to one department, and there's no sharing of sales between game systems. So right now, if someone was to buy Beasts of Chaos, it wasn't getting attributed at all to specialist game studios, despite them being a faction in the old world. It was all going to Age of Sigmar, and now in the future state, he's suggesting that it will all go to Warhammer the Old World as they move over to that game system. Now, the reality is all companies have department-based budgets and department-based sales cost centers in order for finance software to determine granular reporting. So what Rob has outlined is not something unusual for Games Workshop, it's actually the norm. So Games Workshop have to be able to know at their yearly revenue and obviously at more periodic levels what percent came from 40k. Age of Sigmar, Old World, how are each of those game systems performing and what's selling, and it makes sense for them to do things that way. So Rob suggests that the issue here is that, this civil war is now going on between the game system teams, and this is the reason why Beasts of Chaos have been removed from Age of Sigmar and are only going to be available for the Old World moving forward, because the company is only going to allow them to attribute the sales of a model to a single department. They can't be shared. It has to now be one game or the other. And there are a couple reasons why I just don't believe that this could be true. Number one would be that we have many cross factions, such as the 4 Demons of Chaos armies, whereby there is no way for Games Workshop to know if I'm buying a combat patrol for 40k or for Age of Sigmar or even Old World in this case. And other examples in Warcry, Underworlds, Kill Team, Necromunda, there's no way for Games Workshop to know what game the consumer is actually using those models for. So if that's the case already, they wouldn't remove Beasts of Chaos to try and get the reporting that they have to have that way, because it's already, would be a mess given all the other structure that they have in place at the moment. It's just not a possible thing for them to achieve. And so point two is that there's never a position that they can solve for that, because even if a faction is not cross-game compatible, I can still buy now and in the future the new Chaos Marauders from Age of Sigmar, but only intend to play them in the Old World. So they can never know the full split between game systems. Does everyone absolutely love Age of Sigmar, Slaves to Darkness and Chaos in that setting? Or are they actually just taking all of those models and playing them in Warhammer the Old World? They just don't know if this is the process they have to try and split out the cost between these departments. So it doesn't solve that reporting to just be splitting the games off in that way. The next set of reasons there are far more logical reasons for the transition of Beasts of Chaos that don't involve internal departments having disputes or a company process of splitting the departments. The ability to support fair and balanced rule sets is impacted the more armies exist for a game system, but also the more armies extends the duration it takes for any one army to get updated miniatures in the future. If they release a new army tomorrow, brand new faction, and 20 other armies already exist in the game system, after you release that army tomorrow, you now sit in a queue of 20 armies that need to get updated again before that original one can. It's been so long since Age of Sigmar launched, and we have very little new miniatures for Beasts of Chaos because of this type of situation. Another thing is that we have a very unique situation right now. where a game, Warhammer Fantasy, was ended, most of the armies went over to a new game, Age of Sigmar, but now the original game of Fantasy is back, and we have the same models and armies that existed before, but the bases have now been changed, and the base sizes, meaning it's very hard for them to actually be played in both game systems. This is the big argument for keeping Beasts of Chaos, is that why can't we just have them in both? And I think Games Workshop have said, at least for now, we need to streamline how these game systems work, and creating a confusion about selling people the same model in two games that have non-compatible base sizes is actually an issue for them and would be a confusion for the casual consumer. Moreover, one of the real reasons that this comes down to, let's say specialist design studios say they want to revamp Beasts of Chaos or release a bunch of new models for them. Now, if a bunch of people in the lead up to them being able to actually go and communicate and release that, go and buy Beasts of Chaos armies and base them on rounds, well, they've just lost those customers because those customers have just invested their time and money in another game, versus where you will want to funnel them in and spend the time on and effort into the new range of models that you've just been releasing. And that's how they will start to conflict with each other in a unique way that didn't matter between Age of Sigmar and 40k, because both were on rounds, so they could just use their armies between whatever game they like. But there's a huge amount of effort in the process of rebasing an army, or trying to find movement adapters, or trying to explain that to new people to the hobby, that they haven't figured that out yet. So this is a huge problem. So I think they're creating this divide between the game systems, at least for now, to achieve this. Another example of how they would conflict having multiple cross factions is, let's say Age of Sigmar don't have any plans for miniatures for an army, but they do have a new rulebook planned for that army to update their rules and balance, and in doing so there will be a short-term spike of sales for that game. But this may conflict with the old world roadmap, who intend to actually be releasing new miniatures for that faction at a similar time frame, and in doing so you would end up offering the consumers two paths in a short space of time, and they're going to be unlikely to be able to switch between both or afford both, versus spreading it out, which would be more ideal from a sales perspective. So having cross factions all over the place means it takes a lot more strategy and releases, and I'm not saying that it's impossible, but looking for logical answers, this calls out to me. Rob mentions in the video, and specifically in a comment on the video, that it's due to capitalism in Games Workshop that Stormcast are being taken away like this to be resold to you again, because they want you to buy the new ones all over kind of thing. And I actually believe in this case with the Stormcast, it's potentially the total opposite. I actually think in redesigning Stormcast, it was a long-term play. It wasn't about attempts to make short-term profit that would be, the capitalist typical method of whatever, we just do whatever is going to make us the most money in the short term because there's stock prices to consider and we don't care about, anything else. We're just out to make immediate money. I think this situation is actually different. So if we walk back and look at the landscape, the original Stormcast were selling well. They were in a good spot. Many other factions were certainly not. They certainly needed love, like we're finally seeing now with Skaven. And at the launch of the Dominion box set, where we had all of the new models and such, Games Workshop knew full well, a refreshed Skaven line would sell better than those new Stormcasts that everyone already owned. And they had all of those figures. But somewhere they've had to say, you know what? We need to plan longer term here. Sorry to our stakeholders. We need to delay our roadmap. We need to go fix the poster front cover army for our game. It's actually a saturated market now because many customers already own these models right now and they won't be incentivized en masse to go out and buy them. But we need to fix the image of the game and be in a better selling point for new players, which will reap longer term profits from a stronger main faction range. Now, personally, I don't think this was necessary or agree with what they've done, but that is what happened, and it wasn't let's just milk our customers for max profit and not care about how it'll impact them. It was the opposite. I think more of a macro design choice-making decision. So what would this civil war really be about? And to suggest the departments get to make all the decisions and that specialist game studios in this case just got to steal Beasts of Chaos away from the Age of Sigmar or Warhammer main team seems crazy to me. I'm pretty sure that conversation goes more like, hey, do you have any plans for Beasts of Chaos in your game? It seems not. We actually do have plans for them in our game, and by the way, they were made for the fantasy setting versus your thematic high fantasy themes. Can we take them for our game instead? And all that sounds more logical to me, and there's a big discussion to be had, and I want to have, about being able to cross-play factions in both game systems, but that's separate to departments being in civil war as the cause. Stormcast were at risk because they decided they needed to revamp them a long time back. That put them at risk, and because they were releasing crazy amounts of the meme levels and Beasts of Chaos or any other army that have gone years without a range refresh and came from Warhammer Fantasy, not originally designed for that setting, are at risk. But don't panic about your core Age of Sigmar factions like Caradron Overlords, Idoneth Deepkin, for example. Those factions were made for Age of Sigmar. They don't have a huge impact on the IP as a whole that they would ever, concern about fully revamping them in this way. They'll exist in their usual rotation of periodic new models and eventually updated kits where needed. We had a unique situation here with the recent announcements. I guess that's where I should leave my thoughts for now. I will have more, I think, to say in the future about these topics of Stormcast and crossplay, but appreciate you all listening to me. Keen to know what your thoughts are, if you agree with what I'm saying or not. I will reply to all the comments. But for now, thank you and see you in the next one.